many of those creatures won't fare very well if that EIR and its proposals are adopted.
Well, what prompts our outreach to add new organizations to protect Bayona is California's Department of Fish and Wildlife's release of their environmental impact report and development plans for the Bayona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. And it was released despite Fish and Wildlife's own admission of major errors in their flood capacity engineering plans and specs. And their federal counterpart, the Army Corps of Engineers, permitting relies upon accurate fish and wildlife data. It's going to be, according to the Fish and Wildlife, a year for them to fix their problems, and then yet another year for the Army Corps' timetable to be able to review it. So meanwhile, we continue to push for a true restoration based on what was promised to the public and stakeholders and based upon the documented history and science of the site, much as what was written up in the Del Rey community's response to the DEIR. We too have many of those same comments. Bayona is a predominantly freshwater seasonal wetland, yet there's been no seasonal freshwater alternative offered. There aren't even any Bayona-specific hydrology studies. Instead, only the inaccurate flood control models of the channel were provided. What is laid out in the current plans provides no restoration of what Bayona is. Again, what members of Del Rey community have already stated, in that what they are offering is a creation as opposed to a restoration. Plans promote the false premise that Bayona is a saltwater wetlands and that the ebb and flow of the ocean needs to be brought in to save Bayona from drying out. Well, as you know, the ebb and flow of the ocean water over Bayona hasn't existed for thousands of years. Bayona's fresh water is historically at or near the surface, and it has multiple underlying freshwater aquifers that are being threatened by this plans, which require industrial scale bulldozing to remove the current levees, which you see here along Bayona Channel. Those are levees on the outside of the channel. And to create a new set of levees, which is the red line, which please don't be confused that that's a wall. It's actually approximately 200 feet wide, according to Army Corps regs. The interior area, the orange that you see, is the deepest portion that they plan on digging out, and the contour lines that lead up into those red levee walls are the digging out. And that soil will then be placed where those yellow areas are, and they are considered to be berms. Look at even the brown on here, you'll see that it acts as a stopgap for water that might come in during a tsunami. If you see this brown area, it looks as though it's a flood control project for the Playa Vista site, number one. You also raised concerns about is SoCalGas's underground gas storage operations. That peach area that you see there is all of their area of influence. That's what they fess up to, at least at this point. And Playa Vista is on the right. So between Playa Vista and SoCalGas, we have great financial investments at stake that are influencing this site. The effort, just as a background for that, is, and again, also to remind you that Bayona is a unique site offering rare grasslands, uplands, and the predominantly seasonal freshwater wetlands, which are very, very rare to our coastlines because virtually all of them, as Margot Griswold says, they've homogenized the coast to turn them into saltwater wetlands. We are now working to save this from corporate interests and agencies partnering with those interests. As a background of the players here, which is important because there's a bill that will be coming up that we can talk about at a later time, but the effort to dig Bayona out was led by the Coastal Conservancy and the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission leadership and the private Santa Monica Bay Restoration Foundation. And it's a small group of that leadership that were leadership of both until recently litigation occurred that stopped that to help clean it up and divide that leadership, which was again a conflict of interest. Fish and Wildlife is a later partner in this. To begin with, there from 2005 to 2012, a joint EIR-EIS process was ongoing. And it it basically started to exclude the public more and more. And as time went on, these players from the Bay Foundation, in particular, the leadership there tried to go another way. And that other way was to create a new process under the Water Resource Development Act, which basically put the Corps in a position of only dealing with the levees themselves. This shows you the layout of the land. You have area A, B, and C that we fought for years. And Playa Vista was area D, which we did lose to Playa Vista. We were also able to secure the highest protective status, which is that of an ecological reserve. And again, your board members or your membership, at least in your comments to the EIR, made strong input into maintaining the wildlife aspects of this site. It's a watershed map or another map. You can see the Del Rey community up there over on the right, which if you follow the area, you are pretty much just west of Lincoln Boulevard for the most part. But this map shows you your context of where you are in the mix of things. This is another map, again, showing your location, which if you're familiar with this, we can move on quickly. Again, the Playa Vista is in the peach over there on the right, and SoCalGas underlies much of this area and all your various marinas and so on. Here in 1999, Grassroots Coalition went to the Department of Building and Safety to alert and provide our data regarding our concerns of the oil field outgassing in Bayona from the Playa del Rey oil field, and SoCalGas's underground gas storage operations. Building and Safety then set precedents by securing an out-of-state, trying to get rid of conflict of interest again, to act as a peer reviewer of data and ultimately as the city's peer reviewer performing their own gas studies. And this is the result of that study, this mapping that they did, which shows a general description of where SoCalGas underground gas storage is versus all of these blobs that are some of the highest outgassing areas in the country. And as a result of this, the city determined that no residential was to be allowed west of Lincoln Boulevard due to the hazards of building directly over the gas storage operations of SoCalGas. Playa Vista leadership was also in the process of selling the land, and they worked to that end, which they've secured their price of $140 million, and we acquired these wetlands. Here's another historic map with color overlays. This is a map from when there was the Friends of Bayona had their lawsuit, which started in the 80s, that culminated in 1990 with the settlement agreement. But as you can see from this land use plan, the areas that's dot was already slated to remain as parkland. What the Friends fought for diligently and got was the yellow area that I've also overlaid where the Freshwater Marsh is, which the Freshwater Marsh is actually a flood control project for the Playa Vista site itself, which then connects to the riparian corridor, which is what goes east and west at the base of the Loyola bluff face there. This is all important because that land is public trust land, but it is being controlled by Playa Vista. State Lands Commission owns it on behalf of the public, and Fish and Wildlife oversees it also. And Fish and Wildlife is actually on a board, a private board of Playa Vista, which will become important in the next slides. These are some of the historic photos of Bayona documenting it as a predominantly seasonal freshwater wetland. You can see all of this freshwater ponding. And again, the state failed to include hydrology studies of Bayona and provide no freshwater alternative. And this I'd like to draw your attention to. If you can see that little twisting thing up beyond the little circle area that Richard's showing there, that's the old Bayona Channel. During heavy rains, it overtopped that and flooded out the entire area. And the channel, there was litigation against the county and the Army Corps, and the channel was then straightened to try to speed up the water flow, and it ultimately sent it all the way out to the Santa Monica Bay rapidly and as straight as possible. But that area that you're looking at shows the Army Corps was well aware that Bayona was a predominantly freshwater area, because as John Tommy Rosas, who is a Native American who has actually had the standing to work with the Corps, on these issues shows that this is a demonstration that they know that it's a freshwater wetland, because this is where they ended the channel at that time to let the freshwaters flow out upon Bayona. I'd also like you to pay attention to how narrow that beach is down there. I'm going to show you a slide of what actually happened to the sands in the marina, contrary to what the EIR says. And also that opening there out to the ocean is man-made. And but for keeping that opening by man-made dredging, it would fill up. Also, I want to bring your attention to the oil well that's on Jefferson and Lincoln there. That is University City Syndicate. I'm going to show you a picture now. It's in the Freshwater Marsh area of how it's outgassing over top of that area, which is another problem area. Here's some of the pictures of showing it's a freshwater seasonal wetland. That's freshwater, pickleweed. Next slide, showing pollywog eggs, frogs. Frogs only survive in freshwater. They'll all die if this gets turned into salt water, and those are the eggs. And this is a picture from the Department of Water Resources showing the underlying freshwater aquifers of Bayona. So for them to actually dig Bayona out and let that Pacific Ocean water in, they would be violating the laws that you see below, we believe, because this is, it's a violation to harm these freshwater aquifers. In addition to that, the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board cites it as potential drinking water. But legally, it is classified as drinking water. And in a recent Prop 65 case against SoCalGas that found that SoCalGas had contaminated the aquifer in a portion, the settlement agreement for that, SoCalGas states that if that groundwater quality changes, and it would if they dug it out and let all that saltwater influx, SoCalGas would no longer have to remediate its contamination to a drinking water standard level. Once again, you have a very high financial investment at stake. Behooves them to allow that saltwater intrusion into there, because it will not be just those wells, but any and all wells that are found leaking afterwards. And certainly we have a lot of documentation of their wells leaking due to saltwater corrosion at depth, and it would add to the corrosion and so on and so forth. This is a diagram showing how much water that the water board allows to be pumped out under the Howard Hughes site for the cleanup of that contamination. This water is sent, if it was used on Bayona, this is a diagram showing ½ inch of water for this area daily. Now, the water is now sent into the Freshwater Marsh, which is shown here on the right along Lincoln Boulevard there. And it has a clay liner, so it disallows any water from percolating again down into those aquifers. And instead, this water is sent, Richard, if you can follow that line up to the channel, is what's called the main drain. The water is thrown out and thrown away into the ocean. And I'm going to be showing you next pumped groundwater from Playa Vista's gas mitigation system. And in order to keep these systems working, you have to keep the groundwater out of them. So not only is it an experimental system, but they've got to pump this water out. This is phase 2. Next slide is phase 1. And they pump all this water out, and contrary to their own EIR, which states that any waters they bring to the surface will be cleansed and reused on site to replenish the aquifer, they're not doing that. Instead, this water is being sent into the sanitary sewer. And effectively what's going on here is they are walling off Bayona's freshwater from reaching Bayona. And this is an issue that the coastal commissioners in particular have been paying attention to recently and saying, whoa, wait a minute, why is this being allowed to happen? And this is another issue that Grassroots Coalition has been working with the California Coastal Commission. Those two little red dots up there are two drains that one of our members, Jonathan Coffin, discovered out there, which on the lower left, you'll see the drain itself. They were unpermitted. Fish and Wildlife knew about these drains since they bought the place. They have allowed all of this rainwater to continually drain from this area. It is not documented in the DEIR. They don't respond to it in the FEIR. All this water that you see in the second photo there ponds up when it rains, and as you can see in the 12217 photograph far right is when it When the main drain is closed, it ponded up over that. Playa Vista and the Fish and Wildlife consultant said it can't pond there. Well, yes, it is. And right below that, there is the drain itself just after the main drain has been opened and allowed all of this water to rush out into that main drain and flow out to sea. This is what the coastal commissioners are looking at, saying, you are harming Bayona's hydrology. Stop it. Grassroots sued. We won, and it left it in the hands of the Coastal Commission, who said, cap those drains. This is the drain itself. Again, what I had just told you about, and also with them telling the public that Bayona needs water, but all this whole time they've been engaged in part and parcel of removing the water. This is backtracking a little bit to, this is a bag of gas that I collected from the Bayona Freshwater Marsh. And this was part of the Burning Questions, which was an award-winning series, news series, winning a Peabody Award, Edward R. Murrow, you name it, that we have online and can be viewed, showing of the oil field outgassing that is going on in the marsh through these abandoned wells that are leaking. That went out with Nathan Phillips of Boston, who pioneered another technique of ambient air testing. And you can see the catch basin has the one straight up line going to the moon. And the Playa Vista site has its own problems, but my concern right now is all the outgassing there. Here we go back to the picture on the left is from March of 2019. There you can see, per the Coastal Commission's order, the well is capped and it is ponding. Playa Vista said it couldn't pond. This is what Fish and Game got up there with Playa Vista's consultants saying this couldn't happen. Well, again, it did. Keep your eye on the Freshwater Marsh to remember where that well is on the upper right there in the upper picture there. Here we have those capped wells. I went out recently during the holidays, and this is the capped well, which now shows that no longer is it sealed. It is outgassing oil field gases. I've taken a meter out there to show that it's volatile gases coming out of there. Something for which Playa Vista says cannot happen, which Fish and Wildlife through Playa Vista's consultant says would never happen. Can't act as a secondary collector zone, and yet it is. This is a dangerous situation that Exploration Technologies I'm still in touch with, and I've sent all of this information to them. I've sent it to CalGEM, to the Water Board, to the Coastal Commission, and ETI and their colleagues have stated that this is a very dangerous situation that is going on right now, and we are asking them to address it. Here is in 2001, we know that ETI asked for University City Syndicate to be abandoned properly because they found low gas coming up from that area. The city capitulated, had Playa Vista re-abandon it. They re-abandoned it. It leaked almost directly afterwards. And this is now what we have found that is outgassing over University City Syndicate, and ETI is expressing, and his colleagues, their concern for the very need for reabandonment of this site due to the dangers and hazards because of this ongoing leakage. Next slide is a close-up of that outgassing that is occurring. So again, this is State Lands Commission property, which it means it's our property. They're the stewards. They've been a rather absentee landlord. Fish and Wildlife has oversight. They have not been dealing with this. We believe that it is a conflict of interest for Playa Vista to maintain its control. It can be a flood control system for them, but it doesn't have to be under their control. Actually, the flood capacity miscalculation is right above the red arrow. And this is part of a excerpts from a presentation that Walter Lamb, the Bayona Wetlands Land Trust, gave to the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission that describes the problem with that. Also on the upper left, I just want to bring your attention to the fact that in 2004, the restoration was expected to take 3 years and cost up to $2 million for this study. Now compare that to what was hijacked and switched into this $200 million over 10 years to do this crazy plan that came up, paid for. And this is what the Coastal Conservancy said would happen when the public agreed to do it. Here is John Tommy Rosas. He has videos that we have to share online. You can see the state's plan is overlaid this image. And if you go to the next slide, you're looking down on it a little bit more to show you how it fits in to the scheme of things. John Tommy also was fighting for the restoration of the freshwater to Bayona. And here is what's on the cover of the EIR that you're familiar with. And I took Noam Chomsky's quote, the concept of truth just disappears. Here we see land that has been, the berms have just buried rare plants, totally destroyed the habitat. The whole area on the internal area has been dug out. John Tommy has spoken with the Army Corps. There is going to be daily tidal ocean influx into this area up to the top of these berms, which brings in all of that. We know we have the channel water coming down out to the ocean, which is still toxic according to all the recent reports. We'll have all of that trash piling up, which is also a comment that your group made in the EIR. And we'll get into how the wildlife is a kill zone where the levees are. I just wanted to point out, this is again that map. This is a cutaway, some of the views that will be lost. There's a corner, that view will be lost. And here is an actual berm. This is a mile. They plan on turning it into 2 to 4 miles on Bayona. And this is an example of how wide they are and just how huge they are. And they are not wildlife friendly because you have to have pest control to keep any animal from breaching the side of the levee. So you've taken out 20% of habitat. And here is a key thing that we are trying to show, the yellow highlighted area. Keep an eye on that. This is the marina just after it was built. Fisherman Village is not in there. This is a picture on top of when the marina was being created. This is below. And the same raised roadways are the same raised roadways as you see in the lower picture. The fill that Fish and Wildlife has claimed is out there is a myth, and they have provided no data support. And they use it as an excuse to dig it out. Here again is a slide, and we can quickly roll past this, that shows how the beaches were expanded with marina fill, and then we get to the access. And the fact is, they're talking about access. As you said in your thing, we have a lot of access already. We can use the roadways, and we can use the channel itself for all the universities that use it for rowing events. We have raised roadways inside that we can use to take wildlife sensitive tours. There's a roadway on the inside, the north side of the bike path actually, that is also available. Yeah, there's our bikers with our masks. Can we protect Bayona? And a final slide that just shows some of our sources for you to go to. And that's that.